I'm Patrick Tucker, Science Technology Editor for Defense One. Joining me on stage, John Burke, Principal Director, Quantum Science Office for the Assistant Secretary of Defense, Science Technology, and Catherine Sixt, Principal Director, Biotechnology, Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Science and Technology. Let's have a seat. So yes, I've titled this one the Information Challenge because we're talking about quantum science and biotechnology, and these are two critical areas where next generation uses of information science, artificial intelligence, but also just the volumes of data that can be brought to bear on a problem are going to create incredibly next generation realities, technologies, new paradigms for computation, entirely new insights into humanity, our relationship with the biological world, and what that means for national security. So with that, John and Catherine, real quick, just a quick overview of who you are and what you do.
So yeah, as the principal director, Catherine and I both have responsibility over this, over the roadmap for our critical technology area. There are 14 of us, 4 of us in science and technology. So every year we put together, in my case, the quantum science roadmap, which writes down the strategy for the Department of Defense in quantum science in my case. And there's a lot of pieces to that. I'll save it to the discussion to get into the details, but at a high level, there's quantum sensing on one side, quantum computing on the other, and a lot of future capability we're hoping to achieve. A lot of science to do on the way to get there.
Okay. Catherine.
Thank you, and thanks for having us today. Yeah. Appreciate it. So like John, I oversee a critical technology area, but in this case it's biotechnology, and also responsible for roadmaps and setting the strategy for how we use biotechnology to modernize the Department of Defense. That includes traditional uses of biotechnology, such as medical applications, human performance, and biodefense, but it also includes opening up the aperture to all of the other aspects of what biology can do through bioindustrial manufacturing of non-pharmaceutical, non-medical applications. And that's also to include a $1 billion investment in biomanufacturing for the DoD. So we're working on that.
Yeah, see, it's hard to fathom what biomaterial manufacturing for the DoD means. It's not something that I'm used to thinking about. But one of the great things about this panel that I like so much is these are two areas where just the hype cycle is off the charts, like perpetually. Like you want to talk about quantum science is quantum computing. Quantum computing has always been like 10 years away. It seems like it's always been, that's how it's sort of told me, and it's going to revolutionize so many things. And yet incredibly hard. No one can agree yet on sort of where we're at on it, but quantum sensing, much more real-time applications, particularly for the Defense Department, and that's going to revolutionize a lot of, first, the way the Defense Department does things like position and timing, but also potentially the private sector. So, John, real quick, break it down for us. Quantum computing, what is your role there? Quantum sensing, and what, in terms of some of the breakthroughs that we can expect or that you're witnessing come to life, what are some of the near-term quantum sensing things that are on the horizon for the Defense Department?
Yeah, great. I'll start with the sensing part that we know by far the most about. So as you said, positioning and timing, I always like to remember that the original quantum technology was GPS, and that's pretty great. It has its own issues. It's not available all the time in all scenarios. You've probably heard about jamming and spoofing concerns, for example. So we're busily working on other quantum technologies to input position and timing at the edge, at the warfighter, so that they don't rely on GPS all the time, and to give them real autonomy from that. So that's sort of the earliest thing we're working on. And there's a whole slew of technologies under that umbrella. We're really pushing out on that. So even this year, 2024, we've got about $100 million going out the door just on that area. So we're really pushing hard on that. The other quantum sensing portion is an umbrella of remote sensing capabilities and a lot of different kinds of technologies in there. Things like magnetometers to find magnetic objects. You can imagine a lot of things that military might care about have iron in them or steel, things that are magnetic. So we're trying to figure out how to use those in all kinds of different ways. I'll switch to computing. On the computing side, we know a lot less about computing. Right. The industry seems to think they know a lot more about computing. So we are constantly trying to figure out, okay, what is real in the sense that what really could we achieve with quantum computers someday or even sooner rather than later. We're trying to gather that evidence, particularly through some DARPA programs. And then even if we could achieve building those computers, how would we actually go about building one? There are many kinds of quantum computers. They differ drastically in the underlying technologies that make them up. Those underlying technologies themselves are quite immature, so there's lots of manufacturing concerns. So there's a lot of information left to gain before we can really move out on that. And finally, I just have to acknowledge in quantum computing, one hiccup is that the one application we're the most clear about is actually more dangerous than beneficial. And that is that a quantum computer really could impact cryptography and the underpinnings of a lot of our information systems. So we have to be very careful and responsible about how we proceed. So we're being very thoughtful about how we move forward in that space.
Yeah, so that's a good one we want to come back to, because the Chinese have some interesting. There's some Chinese researchers that have some interesting claims about how well they are actually progressing in beating U.S. cryptography, and it's sort of controversial. But I want to return to quantum sensing for a second, because it's hard to understate, and then I get to applications in biotechnology. But when we think about quantum sensing, a lot of people don't understand what we're talking about. The security of almost every bank transaction has a timing function, right? I mean, this is the thing. GPS is the background of our lives, securing really almost every economic transaction that we make, obviously a lot of military applications as well. So moving toward quantum sensing, just real quick question, where are we right now in delivering on a PNT alternative that is useful to the military? And then potentially this could change the way the private sector does encryption around key transactions. Go ahead.
That's right. So, I like a little talking point that 50 times GDP is locked up in GPS time-tagged transactions through the financial exchange. Not to mention wireless networks you're probably using, especially for search and rescue. If you call 911, for example, there's an important capability there. So in the civil circumstances, it's relying on GPS mostly because, frankly, quantum technologies are a little bit expensive, but that's okay for certain strategic missions in the military. So we're starting from those kinds of missions to go with think submarines, strategic bombers, long-range sort of missiles, these kind of assets, to start inserting new technologies. So GPS is based on timing on atomic clocks. We have these things called magnetometers we can put in systems for like this thing called magnetic navigation. It's extremely robust. We're really excited about that. Inertial navigation technologies. Once we get those established, we can start building up the manufacturing base, first through the Defense Department. That seems the path we've always taken. But I think in the long run, you're going to see these kinds of technologies proliferate into civilian airframes. I mean, they had the same issues where you don't be totally reliant on GPS. In fact, the FAA insists that's not the case. So it's just a contributor. So having a really reliable navigation aid is important. So I think you'll see this proliferate throughout. And in respect to the financial sector, there's a whole slew of new atomic clocks I've been working on for quite a while, actually, some decades. They're quite mature now. So you'll see a new generation of those in the next decade or so that really even more precisely manage your money.
Yeah. But some of these magnetometers, these are things deployed right now. We're actually beginning to use them. They're actually playing a part in missions right now.
That's true. That's true. There are, we actually use this new program called AppFit, which I'm not going to try to remember what that stands for, but it's procurement money to buy a new generation of atomic clock to start putting into some strategic assets right now. So we're really just now kind of, the first new wave of quantum technology is really going out today.
Wow. Awesome. So Catherine, I think that a lot of people, when they hear about Defense Department applications in biotechnology, maybe think back to a fictional horror movie that they saw where like the Defense Department does something like crazy. Talk to us. I think what gets left out of that conversation is a very real opportunity space, one where the U.S. is competing with China because there's a ton of robust Chinese interest in biotechnology, but there's also a lot of opportunity that we don't talk about. And I think there's also a lot of expectations that could stand to be better managed. So real-term Defense Department applications in biotechnology that are most interesting to you right now.
Yeah, thanks. So as I mentioned before, biotechnology has been used for actually decades to, going back to the Civil War, was the origin of biotechnology in DoD. And that goes back to the advent of military medicine during the Civil War and using biotechnology for that. And over time, we've found that there are other applications for it. And especially now, what we're looking at is really what they're calling the next industrial revolution. And that's using bioindustrial manufacturing to make things. So instead of now just making our pharmaceuticals or medical applications, we're looking at making fuels with it. And I'm not talking just sustainable aviation fuel. I'm talking about boutique fuels that are really important to certain weapon systems that we're interested in. We're looking at developing next generation munitions through bioindustrial manufacturing.
Wait, you mean we're going to grow bullets? How does
Exactly. They come out like flowers. It's great. No. What you can do is it's those precursor chemicals. So we know that our supply chains are brittle. We learned that during COVID, right? That there's a lot of brittleness in there. And so we can see it in applications for biotechnology and our active pharmaceutical ingredients and our medicines, that those precursors are coming from overseas primarily. But they start with the same sorts of precursor compounds that you do for a variety of different industrial chemicals. We can grow those industrial chemicals essentially. So we can program bacteria and yeast and fungi and all sorts of different organisms to make what we want them to make. So it's an engineering discipline now, not just the way it was for making antibiotics before, but making novel munitions and current munitions.
So yeah, that's fascinating to me. So now we see why this is a information challenge, but also an information space, because you have to understand how. We're having a national and international conversation about supply chains, about scarcity of certain materials. In the event of great state conflict, scarcity of materials, supply chains becomes a sort of key area of interest. Every day I talk to people that want to move the line of production in terms of key munitions closer to where the conflict is. And what you're describing is a story about life and the atomic components of life, but also about supply and creating new things that will fit into our lives in a way that seems very natural and that doesn't seem exotic or strange at all, but is absolutely essential for people that are out there that need to maintain some of these front lines. So I want to take that and then go with you towards some of the more future oriented aspects of biotechnology, because you work with a counterpart at DARPA, right? And under DARPA, there have been some really interesting, forward-looking work done through neurotechnology, and how we can first. You think you've all seen some of this coverage using prosthetics with neural links, give people back a certain amount of motor control, and even by deciphering large signals from the motor cortex, allow people that can't operate mouses or operate computers to interact mentally with these things. Talk to us a little bit about and again, you're just speaking as a subject matter area in this space, not necessarily as someone that has a program that's like doing this right now, but the opportunity space for neuro biotechnology and also creating senses or capabilities that today are very hard to come by.
Yeah, thanks. I will just mention too, as far as things being, in the future for commodities that we buy that have biomanufactured materials. You have clothing today that your Lululemon clothing, Adidas sneakers, they all have biomanufactured components in them. We just don't necessarily know it.
Huh.
So looking at neurotechnology and the opportunity space there, we can talk about the medical applications, which have been worked on for a long time now, looking at how to regenerate a movement back from people who have lost certain types of movement, who never had that movement or capability. But we can also look to things that are even farther forward than that. So there's two types of brain-machine interface that we generally look at, and that's invasive and non-invasive. And there are definite choices that come along with which ones. And I'm just using that as an example, but I think that we could think about that in a lot of aspects of neurotechnology. The choices that we make in being responsible, John was talking about the responsible use in some of the development of technology, because some of it can get into areas that we may not want to cross those lines. And so looking at what we're doing in the US, a lot of the neurotechnology and development of that is happening in the private sector. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a forward-looking thing that we can start to think about bringing into the DoD in more robust areas. But also our competitors and our adversaries are looking at this, and they may not always have the same application that we have, or the same lines that we have. And so I think that there's some deliberate choices that can be made along the way if we really think through in the emerging technology space with this. Your neuro data is quite important, and it is being tracked, whether you realize it or not. There's an integration of your neural data just with your smartwatches, right? There's pieces of that will feed in. That is your data. And so protecting that data is an important component, and it kind of lies outside of a lot of protection spaces right now. That's important for DoD.
Yeah. Well, and I think that brings up something because, when we talk about future applications and this stuff, the area is really wide open. But if a lot of people, a lot of consumers all of a sudden have a bad experience with a private company, possibly owned by a charismatic billionaire who doesn't pay a lot of attention to ethics, and they're pumping out like a consumer device that collects a lot of data that then is not used as part of any sort of regulatory framework, it's going to create a bad impression. It's going to create a certain amount of cultural, social resistance to this experimentation, which could be very bad. So we have to have regulation potentially around neurodata. But then I want to get back to John real quick. Then the application space, what does it look like in terms of, for instance, better human-machine interface? Because this is a really key DoD area of concern, is getting humans and operators to interact with a lot less communication and a lot better communication. How does that apply?
Yeah, so I think that data is critical here. So that data, we can't necessarily decipher what that data is telling us yet, with the exception of a few areas. Mm-hmm. But that data is the training set. That is training data for what we will do in the future. And that's the important piece of biological data across the board, mm-hmm. is that it is a training set for the future. We do not understand all that is locked inside a host of different types of biological data. We just don't understand it yet. When I went to undergrad, they told me 97% of the genome is junk DNA and just along for the ride. It's not. It's actually doing something in there. We just haven't deciphered it all yet.
Yeah.
And so that training set is really important. And so that's critical in getting to the training sets of what we will do in the future with DoD.
And while we're having a conversation about it in terms of the ethics, the custodialship of data, China is able to pursue biotechnology and data collection with no ethical or legal constraints because the government decides what the ethical and legal constraints are somewhat arbitrarily. So this competition is very real. But John, I want to get back to you and quantum computing. So in terms of quantum computing, you guys, you don't field them, you don't build them, but companies like IBM, Google, Lockheed, they are out there building, and you primarily examine the claims that are being made. I get a lot of claims about what's possible with quantum computing today. Where are we on the real science of a quantum computer that is going to, for instance, have big applications for running large-scale artificial intelligence programs?
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
So there are quantum computers today. You can run toy problems on them, and IBM, for example, other companies as well have them on the cloud, and you can even yourself, if you want to entertain yourself, you can learn a little bit of quantum code and go make your own little program, and they can do little things. There are hybrid applications of taking those toy computers as kind of an accelerator for a classical computer, and so there's more interesting things that are underway now. I think we still don't really understand what that kind of hybrid space might look like, partially because it's all of computer science in some sense that we're sifting through trying to find those applications. Mm-hmm. That said, so my general rule of thumb on quantum computing, just first level tests. Quantum computers, you have to take classical information that you and I or a machine we might interact with works with, normal bits, zeros and ones. You have to upload that into a quantum computer, do something with it, and then get something back out of it again. And those interfaces are difficult. In fact, in some cases, we discovered the hard way. It's an NP hard problem just to get the data into the computer, much less the algorithm to run it. So as a rule of thumb based on that, there's sort of how much is going in, how much is going out. So for example, a quantum random number generator. So nothing in, one number out, That's pretty good. You can do that right now. Shor's algorithm is to factor prime numbers, one number in, two numbers out. Pretty simple. Certain material science questions are kind of amenable because have a natural overlap where you're basically simulating a quantum system with another quantum system. So you get a nice linear map. Even then, there's some complications, but that's pretty nice. And then you maybe ask, I don't know, some material property you're interested in. So you get one number out again. When it comes to machine learning or linear equations or differential equations, anything where I want a bunch of information to come in and maybe still a little bit of information to come out, some skepticism is warranted. That said, there are some exciting areas where I've seen machine learning being used in various contexts with quantum computers. So I think there's potential there, but we have a lot more science to do, I think, before it's clear that not only can you use a quantum computer to do machine learning or some kind of AI capability, but also that it offers a real advantage over doing it the traditional way, which is always evolving itself. Mm-hmm. And last, I just want to point that out, right? It's easy to look at the here and now and say, here's my AI. We'll pick on AI. Here's my capability today. In 5 years' time, we'll be able to do this with quantum computers, not taking into account the fact that AI is advancing rapidly in 5 years.
Right.
I mean, you have to really look at where the crossover point is going to be. And that is actually very difficult to do and have even with still some uncertainty, have some confidence, much less enough confidence that I would ask the taxpayer to spend a large amount of money to build a machine to do that. I think we're pretty far from that question answering.
Okay. Yeah. So part of the benefit, though, part of the reason I think so many people are so eager and anxious for quantum computing applied to that problem. If you look at OpenAI, there's a reason they have to partner with Microsoft. The reason they have to partner with a big enterprise cloud company because it takes server farms upon server farms to basically run that. You're accessing it off your phone, but this is an incredibly environmentally and energy intensive thing. So the idea is that quantum computing just harnesses a different, has different thermodynamic barriers. And therefore, you're going to have edge computing that works a lot better, potentially even on-platform computing that works a lot better. Understanding that's in the realm of the possible. There's so many unknowns. Am I right? Is that?
Yeah, the key word is possible. Lots of things are possible given lots of time to work on it. Feasible or economically valuable, that's much, much harder. And it's true, like you said, machine learning, they're using huge amounts of resources to do training and to work on the edge. Quantum computers aren't going to be a trivial computer to run either. In fact, they're not very efficient. They have to work at very low temperature. So for every little bit of power you put into a quantum computer, you need like a factor of 1,000 or 10,000 overhead just to keep it cold enough to keep running at low noise. So I think the jury we'd even impanel the jury before sending it out to answer this question. So again, lots of great ideas, a huge amount of potential, a lot of excitement, and we're going to keep looking at it. And it could be, the way I frame it, it could be many, many years away before any one of these things comes to fruition, but it might happen pretty quickly too, because the companies are working hard, they're spending good money, and there's a lot of smart people working on it. So I would just say embrace the uncertainty, but it's probably not going to be tomorrow that, we open the newspaper and quantum machine learning is making big money for companies, but never say never.
Okay. Well, I know. And so that's the whole thing. It's still this area that intensely needs funding and where there's competition with the United States and China on funding. But Catherine, I want to go back to you a little bit and take that same question. Artificial intelligence applied to next generation biotechnology. How does this kind of unleash a lot of discovery potential that is today dormant? And what needs to happen in order for the biotechnology community to really, especially in the Defense Department, really make use of AI for new discovery?
Yeah. So I'll give an example of where we're using AI for new discovery, and that's in rare earth elements. Mm-hmm. So to be able to mine or recover rare earth elements, you can use a variety of different microbes that eat stuff you don't want and give you back the thing you do want, which is the rare earth element. Understanding how to program those requires that data, and that data over time, it's a nascent space in thinking about how to modify an enzyme so it does what you want it to do, how it works with all the other enzymes in that system as you put together your building blocks within an organism to then put it out there and see what happens. And so that's a space where we're using AI and machine learning to be able to take the data that we have maybe on other types of metals, other types of materials, and look at how we can adapt these to that. So you can use those as training sets to take that forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and help me take that a little bit more to think about some of the applications for biotechnology in defense that I've heard about. One was this was a couple of years ago. It was an O&R grant, but they developed a form of algae that responds very specifically to the upon touching a certain type of metal. That type of metal is one that is very popular among an adversary that makes submarines out of it. So I don't exactly where they finished on that, but that struck me as, wow, this is the sort of thing that could really revolutionize the way we do intelligence collection in a place that's very hard to do intelligence collection. So in terms of opening up entirely new biotechnology areas, how does AI sort of contribute to that? Stuff we haven't even thought about yet. I guess we haven't thought about it, so it's hard to answer, but yes.
Yeah, so in areas where we're talking about programming something, we're using that biological data as the training set to say, okay, now I want to get to this application. But it's also in understanding, just understanding more fundamentals about what that data means. Mm-hmm. So everybody's pretty familiar with genomics, and they know what that genomics is, the information that's being provided in there. But they're not as familiar with maybe other types of omics that come out of that. And there's transcriptomics, there's proteomics, there's glycomics, there's all sorts of different things that happen in a cell, and you can take that information and understand what to do with it. And so there's some learning that would happen there. I could also envision it in some place in the human performance space where we talk about sensing. So when we think about the amount of information that we're actually getting at us, we're only taking in a little bit of that because we only have 5 senses, and some of them kind of suck and some of them are okay, right? But we can think about other animals that have more senses, right? Or have different senses. For instance, we are trichromatic. We have red, green, and blue cones in our eyes. And so that allows us to see in those 3 areas and do subtraction to understand that. There are tetrachromic. And there are tetrachromic organisms, but there actually are tetrachromic individuals. And that's based on the genetics of that. But understanding that space and what does it provide you to be able to see more colors? Does that mean that we should genetically engineer people? No, I don't think so. But how do we actually get at some of those aspects of human performance and understanding that? And so a lot of that lies at the receptor level and at your taste receptors, your touch receptors, all of that. How do we get to understand better how we can maximize performance? Some of that's going to be in the information that we get just from other animals, right? And not just thinking about whales and dolphins, but thinking about insects. Insects can sense movement underneath them, right? Even cats have great mechanoreceptors in their stomachs that allow them to understand when the prey is moving. I don't know that, right? I don't have that sense. So, how do we start to integrate that? And what of those things are useful and what aren't they? That can happen from machine learning.
And that's a really good point, because we want to first clarify that the Defense Department is not making X-Men.
No, not at all.
Much as I kind of hope they would, but I'm a journalist. I don't have good ideas about policy. Don't listen to me on that. But we're talking about using this data to create potentially prosthetics, potentially create or refine new materials, and do this, create things that might enhance warfighter sensing capability in a way that will feel very normal when it finally comes, but it is a result of this understanding of data of the world around us and the living objects in it. That's a very good point. So, John, I want to come back to you, and then also think about questions, please. I want to, you're here, you're live, you went to a room in Virginia to participate, so let them percolate. But John, first, I'll ask a question of you all, because I think this is ties into what I'm going to ask John. Who here is familiar with Shor's algorithm? Who here knows what that is? Okay. There's 1 or 2 people. Great. Oh, well, the director of DARPA is here, so thank God. So this is the algorithm, this is the encryption algorithm that basically underlines all of, we were talking about the encryption that is behind our lives. When you interact with your bank, you're interacting, when you send a text, if you're on an Apple phone, if you use Signal, or certainly if you're a deployed person, you're using Shor's algorithm. It's this incredibly difficult piece of encryption that's very important. And one of the applications that's sort of vaunted about quantum computing is that you can break it. And I wanted to ask you this because I got a chance to. December in 2022, there was a paper out of China called Factoring Integers with Sublinear Resources on a Superconducting Quantum Processor. And it claimed to have found a way to use a 372-qubit quantum computer. Right now, IBM's about 433 qubit quantum computer. So using a 372-bit quantum computer to factor 2,048-bit numbers in the RSA encryption system used by institutions for militaries, et cetera. So a lot of people in the quantum field, very smart people, came to me with great alarm when they saw this paper, but no one was definitely sure what had happened. Just your take real quick.
Yeah, my take real quick is that the sky is not falling. It's not an immediate concern. That particular paper was predicated on another paper that was debunked, actually. They did not factor a 2048-bit number. They factored a very small number and then claimed something about the scaling up to a large number. Mm-hmm. And that scaling argument was quite dubious. So, again, sky's not falling. However, it's worth remembering that kind of warning shot, like, oh man, we don't know exactly what quantum computers are going to be capable of. That's kind of the big question, really. So I think it's a fair concern to ask the question, well, what if someone did have a breakthrough along these lines for factoring numbers or any of the other encryption standards out there too? Mm-hmm. Those all are important questions and things we're, being very mindful of. And so I think it's an important consideration as we press forward in this area for sure.
Okay, I can sleep though. All right, questions from the audience, one or two. Here we go. Over here, John Harper.
Thank you. John Harper with Defense Scoop. I have a quantum question and then a biotech question. On the quantum side, I know this can be kind of tough to predict, but do you have any kind of time frame estimate for when you think DoD will be using quantum computers in a significant way or on a significant scale? And then with regard to biotech, are there any promising areas for enhancing soldier performance, either physically or cognitively, that wouldn't cross some of the ethical lines that you've mentioned earlier? Any promising areas there?
Well, I'll take the timeline question, and the short answer is no one knows when it's going to happen or not. You're not going to get a prediction in some year from me today. I would just say that there are three important ingredients. One is clear economic applications that would make a company enough money to warrant building a big machine or any machine that would run it. Two is the actual technical capability to build a machine you would need to do whatever that application is. And three, from the DoD point of view, is what is our responsible use strategy really going to be in the details, given that the dual use kind of issues at play. So it's more of a, how long that'll take to put together. Now, that said, I want to be clear, I didn't really say this clearly earlier, we're putting more and more effort in the DoD into answering those questions. So we're not just waiting for an answer. DARPA in particular has been putting a lot of effort into figuring these things out, and we've been trying to actively answer those questions so we're as ready as we possibly can to move as fast as we possibly can, given a strong condition to win, a strong condition to succeed.
Thanks. So in looking at biotechnology and human performance, I think the first and foremost thing that has to be done is to really have those clear lines for ourselves, right? Is understanding, knowing the promise and potential within biotechnology and what you can do, and then saying, what are the things that are the standards that fall within the standards and norms of what we as Americans want to see our soldiers doing and want to see applied, right, as a human performance. So just as for instance, when I was talking about sensing vibrations, right, I'm not saying that we should make sensing components within the individual. The reason we know we can sense those is because we know that exists, and we've tuned it now to make an auditory signal back to us, to utilize our current sense. But we have to know that that space is happening out there. And so you can learn a lot from that. And I think that's where that AI ML thing comes in, is like starting to take that in. And then how do you translate that over into a sense that we already have? So we're actually making use of information that's there that we didn't previously know was there.
We're here.
Question. Quantum computing question. Are you looking at other methods of encryption, like rolling and hopping encryption? Are you looking at some of the things that are coming out of quantum computing that really don't have much to do with actual compute, but are great technologies that might be assisting you? Or are you looking only at the quantum side?
If I understood your question, you were asking about other encryption standards that might be safe or reduce the risk of quantum computers attacking them, right? So there's this whole field of post-quantum cryptography, and this is actually super important. We don't know exactly when a quantum computer is going to come along. We need to prepare for it to be pretty soon, so that we have post-quantum cryptography out in the world. There's been a lot of fantastic work out of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and others to really figure out what those quantum-safe cryptographic standards will be, and those will be rolling out soon. So a lot of you might even notice, an update to your favorite web browser, but you'll see a lot of that. To respect to your other part of your question, are there other parts of quantum computing that we're paying attention to? And absolutely, the underlying technologies that are going to make these quantum computers work, whichever qubit wins the race, proverbially, those underlying technologies are useful for all kinds of other things. So recently we have funded under the CHIPS Act, the Microelectronics Commons. There are hubs we've established in the United States, 4 of them, and for quantum technologies to build up those underlying technologies, but predicated on the idea that we could use them for all kinds of things, including many classical non-quantum related technologies. So absolutely.
I want to tell you in on that real quick, because the CHIPS Act very directly attacks supply chain potential issues with the chips that are in the background of all of our electronic space, and it's the reason why NVIDIA is now worth what it is, because they are one new partner in fixing the supply gap, especially for GPUs. Is there what does the supply on quantum look like, both in terms of the workforce, but also the underlying materials and components? Like, is this going to, are there resources out there right now, especially, human resources, but also material resources that are going to potentially be in shortage if there's a big quantum breakthrough that we all have to move towards really quickly?
Yeah, it's a real concern, actually. So we have a pretty limited workforce. I mean, we're trying to do a lot of things with not enough people, and we're constantly trying to figure out, is there some kind of clever thing we can do to really help with that? It's not really a quantum-specific problem. I think it's a STEM workforce issue. If we just happen to be kind of maybe at the leading edge of seeing that problem most acutely. So there's a lot to concern ourselves with there. On the supply chain side, absolutely. So, right, the quantum computer is emerging. The underlying technologies are emerging. If you look under that, you find all kinds of strange materials, or at least very, very pure materials. So you have many layers of the supply chain. A lot of it's global. So we're working with our allies to, with the particular capabilities the different companies in different countries bring to the ecosystem. So there's just a lot of interaction there and a lot of consideration right now. There's a lot of activity trying to figure out where that supply chain is, and even more, where the supply chain is going, because it's going to be in a moving field all this time. It's a very complicated space.
Well, Catherine, just grow you some, right? I mean, that's
That'd be excellent. Do you have any ultra pure silicon? No.
Oh. We can engineer it for you.
Oh, that'd be great.
All right, we got time for like one more question if somebody's got one. No? Okay. Yes, thank you so much for talking me through some of these things. I think it's incredibly exciting, all of the ways that we are going to use next generation biotechnology to experience the world in a very different way. But also, I think this was really helpful for us to understand the national security significance of this, especially in terms of the conversations we're having all the time today about supply, material supply, et cetera. And John, thank you for so much again for disabusing me of all of my marketing inputted notions of quantum computing and where it is. But I think it's still incredibly exciting, as you pointed out. So it is a race, it is a competition in which we are not the only player or runner. So this has been really helpful. Thank you guys so much.